This is just going to be a short one we go into. Shrouded Grove Cave. There's usually not much in here except for like a couple of maybe like a spriggan or two, and some wild animals sometimes. Yeah, it's like a saber cat. You'd think they would have done more with this because there's that Nordic tile set over there. Okay, so you had a spell tome on you. Ice Wolf, Saber Cat. Nothing back there. Yeah, you almost would expect they would have done something more with this place because they've got this Nordic pillar right here. This Nordic totem. Some dead Draugr. Chest. Just some random stuff in it. Pottery, and then this is a skill book for light armor. Ice and Chitin by Palladius Spatic. The tale dates to the year 855 of the Second Era, after General Talos had taken the name Tiber Septim and began his conquest of Tamriel. One of his commanding officers, Bishia of, I want to say, Illyria. I'm going to say Iliolus. Yeah. Bishia of Iliolus had been surprised in an ambush while returning from a meeting with the Emperor. She and her personal guard of 5 soldiers barely escaped and were separated from their army. They fled across the desolate, sleet-painted rocky cliffs by foot. The attack had been so sudden they had not even had time to don armor or get into their horses. If we can get to the Gorvith Ridge, hollered Lieutenant Assuctus, gesturing forward toward a peak off in the mist, his voice barely discernible over the wind. We can meet the legion you stationed in Pornock. Bessia looked across the craggy landscape through the windswept hoary trees and shook her head. Not that way. We'll be struck down before we make it halfway to the mountain. You can see their horses' breath through the trees. She directed her guard toward a ruined old keep on the frozen isthmus of Nerone, across the bay from Goveth Ridge. Jutting out on a promontory of rock, it was like many other abandoned castles in northern Skyrim. Remnants of Reman Cyrodiil's protective shield against the continent of Akavir. As they reached their destination and made a fire, they could hear the army of war chiefs of Dawnstar behind them, making camp on this land southwest, blocking the only escape but the sea. The soldiers assessed the stock of the keep while Bessia looked out to the fog-veiled water through the casements of the ruin. She threw a stone, watching it skip across the trailing puffs of mist before it disappeared with a splash into a crack in the surface. There's no further weaponry to be found, Commander, Acitus reported. There's a pile of armor in storage, but it's definitely taken on the elements over the years. I don't know if it's salvageable at all. We won't last long here, Bessia replied. The Nords know that we'll be vulnerable when night falls, and this old rock won't hold them off. If there's anything in the keep we can use, find it. We have to make it across the ice floe to the ridge. After a few minutes of searching and matching pieces, the guards presented two very grimy, scuffed, and cracked suits of Chitin armor. Even the proudest of adventurers and pirates who had looted the castle over the years had thought the shells of Chitin beneath their notice. The soldiers did not dare to clean them. The dust looked to be the only adhesive holding them together. And they won't offer us much protection, just slow us down. If you run across the ice as soon as it gets dark, anyone who can plan and execute an ambush like the war chiefs of, of Danstar will be expecting that. We need to move quickly before they move any closer. Bessia drew a map of the bay in the dust and a particular semicircular path across the water, an arc stretching from the castle to Gorvith Ridge. The men should be the long. What? The men should go the long way across the bay, like so. The ice is thick there, away from the shoreline, and there are a number of rocks to recover. You're not staying behind to hold the castle. Of course not. She shook her head and drew a straight line from the castle to the closest shore across the bay. I'll take one of the Chitin suits and I'll try to cross the water here. If you don't see or hear from me when you've made it to land, don't wait. Just get to Pornock. Acitus tried to dissuade his commander, but he knew that she would never order one of her men to perform the suicidal act of diversion, that all would die before they reached Gorvith Ridge if the war chief's army was not distracted. He could find only one way to honor his duty to protect his commanding officer. It was not easy convincing her that he should accompany her, but at last she relented. The sun hung low, but still cast a diffused glow, illuminating the snow with a ghostly light. When the 5 men and 1 woman slipped through the boulders beneath the castle to the water's frozen edge, Bessia and Acitus moved carefully and precisely, painfully aware of each dull crunch of chitin against stone. As the commander signaled, the 4 unarmored men dashed towards the north across the ice. When our men had reached the first fragment of cover, a spiral of stone jutting a few yards from the base of the promontory, Bessia turned to listen to the sound of the army above. Nothing but silence. They were still unseen. Acitus nodded, his eyes through the helm showing no fear. The commander and her lieutenant stepped onto the ice and began to rant. When Bessia had surveyed the bay from the castle ramparts, the crossing closest to shore had seemed like a vast, featureless plain of white. Now that she was down on the ice, it was even more flat and stark. The sheet of mist rose only above their ankles, but it billowed up at their approach like the band of nature was pointing out their presence to their enemies. They were utterly exposed. They had come almost as a relief when Bessia heard one of the war chief's scouts whistle and signal to his masters. They didn't have to turn around to see if the army was coming. The sound of galloping hooves and the crash of trees giving way was very clear over the whistling wind. Bessia wished she could risk a glance to the north to see if her men were hidden from view, but she didn't dare. She could bear Acitus running to her right, keeping pace, breathing hard. He was used to wearing heavier armor, but the chin joints were so brittle and tight from years of disuse, it was all he could do to bend them. The rocky shore of the ridge still looked an eternity away when Bessia Fountain heard the first volley of arrows. Most struck the ice at their feet with sharp cracking sounds, but a few narrowly found home, ricocheting off their backs. She silently offered a prayer of thanks to whatever ominous shellsmith, now long dead, had crafted the armor. They continued to run as the first rain of arrows was quickly followed by a second and a third. Thanks, Stendar, Acitus gasped. If there was only leather in the keep, we'd be pierced through and through. Now, if it weren't so high. Bestia left her own armor joints, felt her armor joints begin to set, her knees and hips finding more and more resistance with every step. There could be no denying it. They were drawing closer to shore, but they were running much more slowly. She heard the first dreadful galloping crunch of the army charging across the floe toward them. The riders were cautious on the slippery ice, not driving their hooves at full speed, but she knew that they would be upon them, the two of them, soon. The old Chitin armor could withstand the bite of a few arrows, but not a lance driven by the force of a galloping horse. The only great unknown was time. The thunder of beating hooves was deafening behind them when Acitus and Bestia reached the edge of the shore. The giant jagged stones that strung along the beach blockaded the approach. Beneath their feet the ice sighed and cracked. They could not stand still, run forward, or run back. Standing against the tired metal in the armor joints, they took 2 bounds forward and flew at the boulders. The first landing on the ice sounded like an explosive rock crack. When they rose for the final jump, it was a wave of water so cold it felt like fire through the thin armor. Acitus' right hand found purchase in a deep fissure. Bestia grabbed with both hands, but the boulder was slick with frost. Faces pressed to the stone, they could not turn to face the army behind them. But they heard the ice splintering and the soldiers cry out in terror for just an instant. Then there was no sound but the whining of the wind and the purring lap of the water. A moment later there were footsteps on the cliff above. The 4 guardsmen had crossed the bay. There were 2 to pull Bestia up from the face of the boulder and another 2 for Acitus. They strained and swore at the way, but they finally had their commander and her lieutenant safely on the edge of Gorvith Ridge. By Mara, that's heavy for light armor. Yes, smiled Bestia wearily, looking back over the empty, broken ice floe, the cracks radiating from the parallel paths she and Acitus had run. But sometimes that's good. I may do more like that, where I just kind of stop in these like little caves and just like read what, if there's a book in there, I'll just stop and read some of it. Come here. When you come here during the Civil War, you find a bunch of bandits dead. The premise is that whatever side you got here killed them. My premise is you came here first looking for something. You killed the bandits outside. And when you went in, you weren't able to find anything of value. Yeah, well, my idea is that you tried to come in here, you found this block with rubble, and you left, and that the bandit's chief ended up coming back here to figure out what happened to the rest of their men. And by the time they got here, the Legion or Stormcloaks had already set foot here and just took the rest of the bandits out. Because there is also this room down here. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I really hate the lockpicking mini game. You come over here, you find this chest with like random stuff in it. But one of my things that I think of is interesting is this entrance blocks an alternate way into Corvinjune. Yeah. Imagine if there was a mechanic where you could take a pickaxe, clear all of this out, and you find an alternate way to get to the word wall without having to do the Civil War quest, or you can clear this out, enter through an alternate route, and surprise the Stormcloaks if you go the Imperial route. But yeah, in case some people might have forgotten about this or didn't know, just come down here, like before, during, or even after Corvinjune. Unlock this gate, come in here, and this chest, depending on the mods you have installed, may or may not contain like random loot. I'm using More Loot Ultimate right now, so what happens is a lot of the armors that you may use, they get taken out of the leveled list, like especially modded, and at low levels all you really get are like maybe bows, arrows, potions, gems, gold, some spell tomes maybe, but nothing like of high quality, like sometimes no orcish, no ebony, no Daedric armor appearing in chests or anything like that. More Loot Ultimate locks Dwarven and Daedric behind two relevant and respective quests, which we're going to be doing those with this character at some point. If you come up over here, I think sometimes, yeah, not always, but sometimes there's an extra chest somewhere. But I think you need one of the treasure maps for that. See, I would love to see someone do more with this place. There's a couple other Nordic ruins that could use some expanding on. Yeah, we're not going to the Dragon Word Wall yet. I want to take up this board really quickly. Okay. Yeah, I use Morlu Ultimate, Ars Metallica, and a bunch of other mods. Now we don't want to go to Felglow Keep yet. Not until we do the Mage's Quest.